Hello, welcome to Mountain Gym Card Collectibles. I hope you're having a great week so far. I haven't been doing as many shows just for the fact that, I don't know, the sports card hobby just, I don't know, doesn't seem as vibrant as it usually does. Whether it's, me shopping for sports cards, or selling sports cards, or, just doing the hobby in general, watching stuff on YouTube, watching people put stuff out on YouTube. I have noticed that there's less content than usual. And, for my business, I've been having to produce goods and products that are not related to sports cards. Just for the fact it's tough to, produce products related to sports cards other than just selling off your own cards. But what I've noticed is kind of a harsh reality that seems to go with sports cards, and the fact that I believe you really need to have a more open society, open economy to really allow sports cards to blossom. And I know that there are likely viewers who disagree with that statement. I mean, I would have family relatives disagreeing with that. But, growing up pre 9/11 and then living in the U.S. post 9/11, well, I just tend to think that the politicians have really led the U.S. population down the toilet, with a bunch of breadcrumbs in the process. They're telling you things are going to get better. Things are going to get better. But in reality, when you dig into the numbers, a lot of these changes likely aren't good for sports cards and the market in general. So, when you went over the June 2025 numbers, and you see how massive, the CGC is exploding. But here I am looking at, the year over year for sports cards. PSA total grade 525,000, down 28% year over year. It's down 13% month over month. Now I can point fingers at, the Monopoly boogeyman, the boogeyman of the sports card breakers. You've all done this. But eventually you may agree with my statement that, well, for sports, you really kind of need an open society, to an extent. Now, these are the TCG numbers, up 114% year over year, 911,000 graded. So you ask yourself, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong, Well, TCG is what it is. You're typically getting a lot of younger people involved in it. It's more affordable. But, it may not lead you to where you believe it's going to lead you. I mean, I have quite a few Pokemon slabs up for sale. And the harsh reality is all the TCG grading is it's oversaturating the market, So, maybe the fact that people aren't grading as much sports cards is good overall. But overall, it just feels like there's less interest in the sports card hobby overall. Now, I just pulled this up today. Stock market today. Dow falls 300 points on Trump tariff news. NVIDIA back CoreWeave tumbles. Now, here's the thing about tariffs. And I've told you that I'm getting more into, creating products. Well, tariffs don't create factories, all right? It's not like you can be a witch or a wizard and you have a magic wand and you swirl the magic wand around and poof, I gave you tariffs. Now, all of a sudden, we have all these U.S. factories. Well, the problem is the U.S. tends to train, educate their citizens more on how to be good workers. You know what I mean? Than factory owners. And I'm running into this issue. Now, for me, I would like to run a factory. But there are so many hurdles to opening a factory. I'd rather run a factory than be a blue-collar service worker. That's just me. I mean, I've done a lot of service work. I don't get as much joy doing service work as, say, creating my own products. So then we hit another issue. And that's the fact that if you've been reading the news this year, I mean, I'm reading the news all the time. Layoffs after layoffs, more mass layoffs. Okay. And then store closures on track to far exceed 2024 levels. I mean, and everywhere I'm looking, businesses are just closing down right and left. I told you, just because you throw tariffs on something doesn't mean that it's like a magic wand and poof, your economy is going to rebound. Factory, manufacturing is going to explode. And this is from Newsweek. So, pre 9/11, a lot of the news was more or less partisan, I should say. I wanted to be a journalist. I went to school for journalism. I became a journalist. I couldn't be a journalist nowadays. Why? Well, it's so partisan. It's like you have to be on the right or left. I always try to be down the center because I don't like politics. I don't like either party. I'm putting that out there. I don't like Republicans. I don't like Democrats. I wish that they'd all go away with all their political BS and just let us live our lives. But hey, that's just me. A lot of other people would disagree. But let's dig into this article a little bit, about these store closures. Store closures on track to far exceed 2024 levels. Store closures across the U.S. continue to rise and remain on track to far significantly surpass both new openings and the figures seen in 2024. According to a new report from research and advisory firm Coresight Research, cited by CoStar News, 5,822 store closures were recorded as of June 27th, compared to 3,496 closures announced during the same period of 2024. The 2025 closures have also far outstripped the 3,960 announced openings this year. Okay, so they blame, the stark increase in closures reflects on long-term challenges to the retail sector, which has for years battled declining foot traffic and the rise of e-commerce. Yep, persistent inflation, tariff hikes, blah blah blah. All that stuff is hurting small business. If you want to pretend it's not. If you're not a business person, if you're more into the realm of politics, maybe you want to believe that this is not hurting sports cards and business in general, with what's going on in the U.S. You can just kind of keep going with the flow, I guess. All right. And then, of course, we hit all of these constant ICE immigration raids where it just feels like they're more or less terrorizing everybody, especially California, the southern states. And when you dig into our U.S. economy, a lot of our U.S. economy, strangely enough, has been built off of illegal immigrants. And that's because it's just so tough to become a legal citizen in the U.S. And even if you are a legal citizen, it's just like the Trump administration is going out and stripping, your naturalized citizenship away. I mean, I don't even know what to say. So even if you are legal, it's just like they can just strip your citizenship away. I mean, I doubt that they would do it for someone like me who's had relatives in this country, since the late 1500s. But you just never know. But it's not a good feeling. It's not a good look. And maybe you disagree with it. And hey, maybe you support ICE. But like I said, to me, this is all politics. I understand that there needs to be laws. I get that. But be honest with yourself about sports cards and the U.S. business market in general. Why is the sports card market hurting the way it feels like it is? Just like people don't really care about the way they did a few years ago. And then you pull up this number. And this is really the most atrocious number that you're going to likely take away from what I'm telling you today. Now, if I could produce stuff for sports cards, if I could get into the realm, I would. But they make so many laws, it's been monopolized by Toss Fanatics, Panini, all these other companies. It really makes it hard for small business people to break into, sports cards. But when you look at this number of all of the political promises from politicians, now I'm trying to remind you that politicians are not business people. I doubt that Ice Barbie or many people involved in the Trump administration are having to deal with the sort of issues that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, being a business person, trying to swim in this pool. Now, we all pretend that America is the land of business. This is where you go to open a business. Well, the more you dig into the numbers, the U.S. is not very business friendly. We have the store closures. If you're an investor in the stock market, yeah, overall it's gone up in the last 5 years. Okay, but lately it's just really tough to gauge. A lot of stuff is crashing. And then, so you have that going on, and you ask yourself, all the stuff that the politicians are doing, is it good for the U.S. business market? Is it good for sports cards? Is it good to try and survive in the U.S.? Laws are laws. I get that. But here's the thing, is so often you can watch the news of business owners. They're always having to, source products out of China. And this is why. In 2024, China had approximately 6.03 million manufacturing enterprises, while the U.S. had 605,548. And I'm trying to get more into manufacturing with my business currently, producing my own products. And it's so tough to do. I've contacted factories in the U.S. about things. They don't really do anything for you. So I've contacted factories in China. They're willing to work with me. Sorry, guys. And I know that hardly anyone watches my videos, and I'm not getting much manufacturing, I'm just kind of starting a few, products. But that number there, it tells you everything about the U.S., Politicians, with their magic wands, can't create manufacturing. They can't create interest in, say, sports cards. I wish they could. I wish that people would step back and look out of the box and go, well, all of these restrictive measures flowing out from the government, whether it's, ICE, this beautiful big bill, where people are going to be losing their Medicaid, and medical care is so expensive in the U.S. anyway. I mean, if you don't have insurance, I'm telling you, you might just think about moving out of the U.S. because if you don't have insurance, there's a good chance that if something happens, you're just going to get your whole life, destroyed. It's all about giving money to the hospitals. And so a lot of the service sectors in the U.S., when you step back and go, how are people making money in the U.S.? Well, if you're a lucky business person, well, like an oligarch, well, the U.S. government will hand you millions of dollars. That's great, but it's not booming our manufacturing sector. Just these numbers are just atrociously, horrible. Is having a bunch of people working for ICE, is having a bunch of people working for law enforcement, is that bringing up our economy? No, it's not. Maybe it is for, the politicians and their service people, but it's not. We are not even close to the manufacturing enterprises that China has, is constantly terrorizing, members of the U.S. with ICE. Is that creating more factories? No, it's not. It is building, these immigration detention centers. They're commonly called concentration camps. Is that helping our economy? Is that making these numbers explode with U.S. factories, with U.S. manufacturing? No, it's not. And that's all I'm trying to let you know is it's quite apparent to me that if you want a healthy sports card industry and overall a healthy manufacturing economy, that actually works for the U.S., well, then you're going to have to get rid of all these politicians to an extent. You're going to have to let them sink down to a level where they are very low on the totem pole here, because I'm letting you know that as a business person, this stuff isn't working. It's not magically creating factories. And I explain why is so much of the education system in the U.S. is dedicated to creating, people who work in the service sector, nurses, law enforcement, ICE. How many billions does government give them to ICE? And given all that money to these sectors isn't really helping our economy. Now, if you're someone who has to survive on business in the U.S., you've likely felt it, and you're going, well, why is it that so many, people in the U.S. have to, rely on China? Well, this is why. It's because being gaslit by a bunch of politicians isn't helping the market at all. And it's clear to me that you have to have a more open society for sports cards and sports in general than closing it down and letting someone, I guess, like Stephen Miller, who, believes that the U.S. should be, I guess Nazi Germany version 2.0, where everyone, a very few limited amount of people can live in the country is the way it is. Listen, that's just not the way it works. It just isn't. It's not really healthy. So if you're one of these people wondering why sports cards are tanking, well, there you go. You have to have a healthy economy. You can't have a bunch of store closures. You can't have, the ups and downs on the Dow Jones. You can't have ICE terrorizing everyone imaginable, arresting. I just saw a thing here in Montana where they're sending this woman to 5 years of prison because she was trying to help out 2 illegal immigrants. And it's just like, well, all these measures from the politicians isn't good for the economy. It just isn't. And sports cards are going to continue to go down the toilet unless you decide that you want to change things. Now, hardly anyone's watching my show. I understand why. I mean, that's why I'm not doing many shows. I'm focused more on my business every day to get it up to where it has to be. And I'm noticing a lot less content from all the people I'm subscribed to that do sports card content as well. And to me, that's why is really the boogeyman behind a bad economy, behind a bad sports card market, is it's always the same individuals. Politicians. Anyway, if you have a different opinion, leave some comments. Thank you to my subscribers. And, hopefully we can get this market back to where it used to be, get more excitement, get more content out there. But otherwise, I don't know. I explained a lot of the reasons, that I've run into, with I'm trying to, get a product up. It's not a sports card product, because you're so limited on what you can do for sports card products. But I would explain to you, there aren't really any factories in the U.S. that I can work with, it's tough to start a factory. So I've had to contact, Chinese factories. And I'm asking myself why. And I showed you the number why. It's clearly they're more dedicated to economic feasibility than the U.S. is. And I've told you many times, those U.S. politicians are all about U.S. politicians and creating this government that I guess just likes to terrorize everybody, a police state. But it's not good for business. So anyway, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. I'm out of here. Bye.